Hi, and thanks for joining me here at Dean Park. In this video, I'm going to go through the ballasting of the incline with some quick but effective ways to achieve good results. I'm also going to highlight some new rolling stock upgrades in the way of these Mark 1s, courtesy of the weathering works. You may recall in a previous video I said I was going to bring you some updates to the station area. However, these upgrades are now so epic, I'm going to put those in a standalone video. So keep your eyes peeled for that upload. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy the video. If you have any feedback or comments, please post those in the comments section below. Before I get stuck in about the ballasting of the track, I've got to smooth off and blend in this area here. Now, at the moment this is just plaster cloth that is dried, and underneath that was the blue styrofoam that you saw in the last update. I'm just going to use the plaster to blend in this area here, tidy it up, and also up against the wall section here, just to give it a better transition onto the flat plywood that's here. After that it'll be painted and blended in with the rest of the embankment, and before I move to the next phase, which is round the corner here. What I'm going to use is the Smooth It road system, and that is ST1452 from Woodland Scenics. It's basically a general purpose plaster that allows you to carve it and sand it after it's dry. You get about 15-minute work time with this, obviously a little bit longer if you water it down. I've got the Woodland Scenics carving plaster as well. They're much of a muchness, to be honest. You can get away with using polyfiller if you want as well. Now I know this will probably make me sound like a Woodland Scenics sales rep, but I've actually got these Woodland Scenics mix-in tubs there that are made from a plastic, and they've got the measuring inside there as well, so you can get accurate mix of the carving plaster. You also get a spatula in the pack. What I like about these, and I've had them for years, is that even if the plaster is dry, you can basically flex the rubber and the plaster will come off, so it's a lot easier to clean than say a rigid plastic bowl. So that's why I like these. Plus when you're done, you fold them away and they stack up nice and neatly. I'm now at a stage that I've got enough of the landscape done and some of the texture painted areas completed that I can put some ballast down on the tracks. I'm going to start with the incline track, and at a later date I'm going to ballast the two main lines that you see at the bottom of your screen. I'll take you through the process from laying down the ballast to then sealing it in place with the glue, and in a future video I'll show you how to weather the track. The tools that I need for this are some medium ballast, and that's from Woodland Scenics. It's a grey blend. I've also mixed some fine ballast in there with it, just to give it a bit of variation when it's down on the track. In the middle I've got a green scene ballast spreader, and I've got a paintbrush at the right hand side there, just for tidying up any errant spills of the ballast as I do the laying. The green scene ballast spreader is a handy little kit. Doesn't hold too much ballast, you have to keep filling it up at regular intervals, but it'll allow you maybe a foot and a half of ballasting from one hopper fill. When you're using the ballast spreader, slow and steady kind of wins the race here. Keep it moving. Don't go too quickly or you end up having a situation where you miss areas, especially around the shoulder at the side of the track. But if you do, don't fear. When you spread the ballast out, that should all blend in. This section of track is sitting on a 3mm cork underlay, and so you could see here that the ballast hasn't quite fallen and covered the edge of the cork there. But as I spread it out, as I said in my previous clip, you'll find that the ballast tends to naturally fall and cover the join between the cork and the baseboard. If it doesn't, you can always top it up by spooning on some ballast along the edges. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get the ballast off the top of the sleepers. So I just use my finger for this and move it gradually along the tracks. I'm starting at the top of the incline here for obvious reasons. This is where I join up with the existing ballast. And I'll let gravity help me push the excess ballast down the incline as well. So you can see there, just by gradual passes, I've started to take the excess off the top of the sleepers. I'm not there yet. I'm going to continue working away here using my finger along with a paintbrush handle and a small paintbrush to kind of tamp the ballast into the sleepers, and then after that I'll check it over before moving on to the next stage. After tamping down the ballast using the handle of the brush, and don't hammer it too hard with the brush, you don't want to damage the railhead, I can still see areas where I've got stubborn ballast that's above the sleepers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dampen my finger, and I just literally take off the excess. And that should remove more of it from the top of the sleepers. Doesn't have to be perfect. On the modern railway, you sometimes see the sleepers that are actually covered by a kind of line of ballast down the middle anyway. So it depends what era and what kind of look you're going for. I'm now going to re-tamp it just to see if I can get rid of some more of that ballast. Remove the last 2 or 3 bits that are clinging on, and there we go. As you can see, when I ran my finger along the side of the rail there onto the outer sleepers, it covered the gaps between the cork and the baseboard, and I had to kind of top it up a little bit there with a couple of teaspoons of ballast just to ensure that it was fully covered. I've now reached the top of the incline. The incline itself doesn't have a strip of cork that raises the track up to give it a ballast shoulder when I put the ballast in position. What I did was I just put the cork on top of the foam risers, and then underneath the track I used some DCC Concepts power base plates, and these are highly magnetic steel plates that I basically glued onto the cork and then glued the track to the actual plates themselves. What the power base does, if you've got say for example a steam loco with large driving wheels, you can suffer with traction on inclines. It was the same in the real railway, that's why they used to use banking engines back in the day. If you've got say a rake of 8 or 9 coaches or a lengthy wagon load with a steam train or a twin axled Bobo diesel or electric engine, it'll suffer with lack of traction, especially on an incline, and a curved incline adds an extra challenge into it. So what you would do is you could fit magnets to the bottom of your loco, and you get small cradles from DCC Concepts to allow you to fit those magnets, or you can just glue them onto the bottom of your locos. And what this does is the magnet draws down to the magnetic plate under the track and basically pushes the loco down into the track to give it more traction. This does work. DCC Concepts demonstrated it on one of their videos on their YouTube channel. I've been using it on my inclines. Whilst I don't really need it for the current range of locos that I've got, the class 87 does struggle because obviously it's only got 4 axles, whereas the HST etc can actually make it up the incline. And for a class 47, a class 37 or a class 40 with the extra axles, it's not a problem, but it's there in case I need it in the future. For example, I might want to run Flying Scotsman up the incline with a long rake. I might have to fit magnets to the bottom to aid the transition from the lower level to the upper level. So it's worth checking that out. It's DCC Concepts Power Base. Well, that's incline now being ballasted. I'll let that sit for a day just to settle, and then I'll come along with the next phase, which is adding the glue and water mix to seal it all in place. With the ballast now in position, it's time to seal it in place, and for that I'll need some run-of-the-mill PVA, I'll need some washing up liquid, a jug full of tepid tap water, a spray bottle, again full of tap water, a dispensing jug, copious amounts of kitchen towel. I use some disposable gloves just to keep it less messy on the hands, and I've also got a syringe and a small dropper bottle there as well. What I've done here is I've added 200 millilitres of the PVA in with just about the same amount of water. I've then added a few drops, just a few, of the washing up liquid. What the washing up liquid does is help break down the surface tension of the ballast, and it allows the glue and water mix to flow into the ballast itself. I then get the trusty Dean Park stick and I give it a good mix together. You're looking for a milky, slightly thicker milk consistency when it's all mixed. As you can see, I've started a little bit of the gluing there. What I'll do now is I'll use the scoosher bottle just to saturate an area around about 2 feet in length. I'll give it a couple of minutes just for the water to penetrate into the ballast before then going in with the glue that I've just put in that little dropper bottle that you saw in the previous clip. It's a good idea to cover any of your precious back scene or buildings at this point. You don't want them soaking with water. Now taking the dropper full of the glue, I'm just going to start off where I left off before and just slowly and carefully to start with add drops of the PVA and water mix along the outside of the sleepers. Just be careful at this point to add little drops. If you add too much, it'll squirt out and it'll disturb your ballast. At this point you might find it sits on top of the ballast just for a little bit longer until it starts to get into the depth of the ballast, and as we build up the coats we start to saturate the ballast and it flows a lot better. I'll just go back along once it's soaked in. This time I can be a little bit more generous with the glue. Just going along the outside of the sleepers just now, don't worry about the ballast shoulder. And I'm going to do the same to the other edge. Middle. As you start to build up the coats of glue on the edge of the rails there where the sleeper meets the shoulder, it'll start to soak into the shoulder, and before you know it the glue will be starting to seep out onto the baseboard. Then you know you've given it enough and you can afford to leave it and move on. I'm just holding the dropper around about a couple of centimetres away from the top of the ballast. Don't squeeze too hard with your pipette or your dropper or your syringe, or you'll end up squirting glue out and disturbing your ballast. As you can see now, I've got some of the glue just oozing out the bottom of the ballast at both sides, and it's sitting a little bit longer on the sleeper tops. It's at this point that I know that I've saturated the ballast and it's time just to leave it. You're going to have the ballast down for a few years, hopefully. You don't want it disintegrating and flaking into bits, so it's better to just give it a good saturation now and give it a firm foundation for using with your trains for years to come. You'll find the amount of glue that's needed depends on the thickness of the ballast you're putting down. For example, the first section was sitting on a 3mm piece of cork as it came off the main line at the depot. As it comes on to the incline, it's not sitting on such a deep area of the cork, so there's less ballast, there's less shoulder at the side, so therefore it requires a little bit less glue in order to saturate it. You've just got to gauge how much glue you put down, and as I said, when it's this kind of milky saturated look, I would leave it. If you're finding that it's not soaking into the ballast when you put the glue down, there's one or two things that you can do to remedy that. You can go over it again with the water to kind of soak it a little bit more, or you can add a little bit more washing up liquid into the glue mix. This piece of wood here, I've got some scrap ballast on the top and it's dry, it's not been soaked. And I'm going to take the same glue as I used on the track, and as you can see, it kind of runs off and takes the ballast with it, or it just sits on the top. And that makes a mess of your ballast because it moves it as the glue is applied. And you wouldn't get that, or you don't get that, when you apply a bit of moisture to the surface with water or some IPA. That's all ballasted now, well into the tunnel area. The best thing to do now is just leave it. Don't touch it, leave it for a good 4 or 5 days, especially at this time of year in the climate that we've got up here in Scotland. It looks a bit white just now, but as the glue dries, this will dry clear and the colour of the ballast will come back. I originally mixed up 400ml of the water and the glue mix. I only really used just under 3/4 of that, and I've obviously saturated all the track that I needed. I would have used more obviously if I was doing a double track thing, so I kind of forgot what I was doing there with the amount that I mixed up. But hey ho, the track that I needed done is now saturated, and I'm happy now just to leave that to set. Well, I hope you found that little sequence of me putting the ballast down and gluing it in position helpful, and something you can use on your own layouts at home. In that sequence I didn't talk about ballasting a point. That's a slightly different process, and if you click on the link at the top of the screen now, I've done a video on how to go about ballasting turnouts. For a while now I've been running some parcel and mail stock here at Dean Park, and these have been made up of the Mark 1 BG in both blue grey, blue and Royal Mail red. I've also got some GUV vans in the full blue livery as well. However, it's always been a little bit unrealistic because all the vehicles have been in pristine condition. And if you've ever seen photographs or footage of mail trains, they were always pretty dirty. They never got a wash. They're basically washed by the rain. So what I decided to do was send these off to the weathering works and get the full rake of 9 of my coaches done to a realistic level from the mid-1980s. Obviously, if you get it of an earlier period, they may be a little bit less dirty, or if you go into the 1990s, you start to see degradation of the actual vehicle itself built up on top of a heavy layer of weathering. So I've gone for the 1980s look to run with my current stock. Looking first at the blue livery vehicles, I really like the grime that we've managed to get along the bottom here. Scott down at the Weathering Works really has captured the feel of a GUV and a BG van in this kind of livery. I also like the kind of weathering effect that you're getting on the blue, just to show the degradation of the livery itself. I don't know if the camera's picking that up, but there is a kind of lighter tinge to the quite deep blue that you get straight from the box from a Bachmann BG and GUV vehicle. The level of the weathering on the roof varies from vehicle to vehicle, and I especially like the extra detail around about the roof vents and the rain strip, especially there on the GUV van. The vehicle that perhaps the weathering pops most of all is on the Royal Mail Red BG, and as you can see the streaking from all the raised detail on the side of the coach there, from the handles to the bottom of the windows, it really gives the impression of a vehicle that's not been looked after, it's not been through the wash in quite some time. It's just there to perform its purpose of getting mail and parcels from A to B. I especially like how the weathering along the bottom of the coach has in places masked out the yellow Royal Mail strips and the BR double arrow. Finally, looking at the blue-grey vehicle, obviously you've got two tones here, you've got the grey and the blue, and the weathering works differently on both. On the grey areas, I especially like how the dirt is in the recesses of the door shuts and around the hinges, and it really does make that detail pop. The bogies are thoroughly manky as well, along with all underframe detail and battery boxes. So yeah, I really am impressed with this blue-grey one, and it will sit nicely with my previously weathered ScotRail Mark 1 stock that I run on the layout. I've used a few different companies over the years to weather my stock, but I've now kind of focused on two main ones that I like and trust, and one of these being the Weathering Works. You could argue, well Dave, why don't you do it yourself? You've surely got the skills to do it. After all, you weather your buildings and your structures in the layout. Well, when it comes to rolling stock, it's something I've not really had time to practice on, and especially with the price of things these days, I don't want to screw it up with a dodgy weathering job. I'd rather give it to the professionals. And for the sake of £10 from the Weathering Works per coach, you know, it's saved me a lot of time, and it's got a standard of finish that I'm really happy with. So for me, it's good value for money. If you're still with me, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you've got some hints and tips that you can possibly use on your own layouts at home as well. As you've seen from this clip, and indeed some of the running clips, I've started to fit overhead wires to the electrified lines. This means replacing the entire layout of the depot masts and fitting the peco ones, and then installing the wires. This is a massive job, but hopefully it will pay dividends and just increase the level of detail on the layout that little bit more. So stay tuned for a future video on real progress on the electrification of the lower main line and the upper main lines as well. It's an epic task, but yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it completed. In the meantime, thanks for watching, stay safe, and cheers for now.